Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, across the airways. We're back to Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on this show again. It's the American Sports History Podcast, hosted by a brother, a mentor, and a friend to me, and Peter Ray. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing it in Los Angeles. 347-205-9631. Goes quick in 30. So check out that archive on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports, podcast platforms, wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We send it up on social media with the hashtags as well. So that's why these shows are blowing up, and we're just so blessed to be a part of it. So without further ado, let me lay the red carpet down, put that podium in its place, hand off the mic. First of all, Peter, the first through threes. How are you? How can people get a hold of you? And you're bringing a guy back that's, boy, I'll tell you, he's an icon in that city, right up there with the Liberty Bell and probably the Ben Franklin statue. So I'll just turn it over to you, my friend.
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well. I have a YouTube channel. It's a channel name is my name, Peter J. REA. It's a history channel, history videos. And you're right, for the second time, we have the author of 4 amazing sports history books: Bench Bosses, the NHL's Coaching Elite 2015, The Art of the Dealers, the NHL's Greatest General Managers 2017, Lord of the Gridiron, College Football's Greatest Coaches 2019, and Lords of the Gridiron 2, Pro Football's Greatest Coaches 2022. Welcome to the show, Mr. Matthew DiBiase.
Peter, Mark, it's great to be back, and man, it's always an honor to share the airwaves with you guys. It's always an honor and a privilege.
Well, it's an honor and privilege for us too, because we're focusing tonight and last time and tonight and continuing. Hopefully, I'm hoping to have you on once a month, because this is a pro football history book that you've written, which is just incredible. And now I got your book since last time. I read about the first 10 coaches, and I just want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about Paul Brown, the number one in your list. In 1945, the Cleveland Rams won the NFL championship. After the season, they moved to Los Angeles, and then in the off season, a new league was formed, the All-American Football Conference, with the Cleveland Browns' first year in 1946. Paul Brown was the main guy, and then for the next 10 years, the Browns were in the championship game, 4 in the AAFC. Then they joined in 1950 the NFL too, when the AAFC folded, 2 other teams, and NFL Commissioner Bert Bell called the Cleveland Browns the champions of the Humpty Dumpty League, and then, which was very insulting. And then their first game in the NFL in 1950 was against the Philadelphia Eagles, the NFL champions in '49, and Cleveland won 35-10. Otto Graham was interviewed years later and said that they were so pumped up because of the insults they had gotten, and he said they would have played the game for a keg of beer, or in his case, a chocolate milkshake, since he didn't drink. And so anyway, Paul Brown, founder of the Browns, founder of the Cincinnati Bengals, and then the interesting thing is that he wanted to win. And when he started the Browns, there had been a color bar in pro football, no black players for like 12 years. So he signed black players, and they were a major factor why the Browns were so good, especially Marion Motley, tremendous running back. The thing that's kind of sad, that's sad about Paul Brown is that he didn't encourage his assistants. Blanton Collier, he felt if an assistant wanted to be a pro coach, a head coach himself, he thought they were being disloyal. It's very sad. He didn't encourage Blanton Collier. And he had Bill Walsh he could have named as his successor, and he didn't. So you think, wow, what a major error. And the fact that he didn't care about these other guys who probably, they wanted the same thing, but he was selfish. Do you have any, we talked a lot last time about Paul Brown. Do you have anything else you want to talk about him, Matthew?
Well, you talk about that very first NFL regular season game they played in 1950 against the Eagles. In many ways, that kind of ranks up there when the New York Jets beat the Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III. Here you had the two Titans, the Eagles were the defending NFL champions. They had won 2 straight championships in a row. They had one of the best defenses in the NFL with their 5-4 defense. And plus they had Steve Van Buren. Then you got the Cleveland Browns, who absolutely dominated the All-American Football Conference. So in many ways, that game was kind of like, like Super Bowl III, a precursor to Super Bowl III. In other words, were the Browns legitimate? Or, I mean, another derogatory term they used for the Browns is they called them a basketball team because they passed so often. And yet in that game, where they beat the Eagles 35-10, they showed that their tactics were superior to the Eagles. I mean, they were able to gain enormous ground game against the Eagles' 5-4 defense. They spotted a flaw that, since they used a 5-man line, there was no middle linebacker, so the defensive guard, or today we call him a nose tackle, was strategically isolated. So what they did was they spaced out their guards and creating wider splits, and that isolated the middle guard. And what they did was they used their patented trap play, using a double team on that middle guard, and Marion Motley was able to run at will right up the middle there, using the spacing there. And meanwhile, Otto Graham had two great receivers, and Max Speedy and Donnie Lavelli, and the Eagles secondary couldn't double team anyone, because if you double team Lavelli, that meant Max Speedy could get open, and if you tried to double team Speedy, that means Donnie Lavelli could get open. And then when Otto Graham wasn't thrown to his receivers, he could throw to his backs. I mean, he was one of the greatest button hook passers in NFL history. And the Eagles secondary, I think he threw for Graham threw for 346 yards, I think, something like that, around that figure. And here's the kicker. They beat the Eagles 35-10. Actually, it should have been 56-10 because the Browns had 3 touchdowns called back due to penalties. Yeah, due to penalties. It would have been an even bigger blowout if they hadn't committed those penalties and all that. But it was a signal moment. I mean, it was a message to the NFL that, hey, the Cleveland Browns are the new great power in the NFL. And from 1950 to 1955, they dominated the NFL, always appearing in the NFL championship game and winning 3 times in 50, 54, and 55. I mean, it was one of the great moments in NFL history. And it was just, I think it's a signal of Paul Brown's coaching genius that, he was able to figure out the weaknesses in the Eagles defense and then create a game plan to exploit those weaknesses. And also the enormous depth of talent. You had 2 great receivers in Lavelli and Speedy. You had Marion Motley. You had Dub Jones, who could come out of that backfield and catch passes. You've got Lou Groza, who was not only a great offensive tackle, but he was also a field goal kicker, the greatest field goal kicker of the 1950s, with his place kicking. And that was another weapon by Paul Brown. Before Lou Groza came along, field goal kicking was kind of like a haphazard art, but Paul Brown made place kicking a key weapon in his arsenal there. In other words, it wasn't a sin to go for a field goal there. If you could get close enough, you had Lou Groza, virtually automatic. He could just set up his measuring tape, put it down, and he could nail it right through the uprights. He had a great weapon, and Lou Groza. He had the offense, he had the defense. It was just, they were a total package, and that's why 10 consecutive championship games and 6 consecutive NFL championship games, which was never broken. Certainly not in the pre-Super Bowl era, and definitely will never be broken in the Super Bowl era, Peter.
Right. And interesting is after Otto Graham retired, Paul Brown never won another championship. So one of the things, as I'm going through your book and thinking about these coaches, the great coaches had to have a great quarterback. And before we get into Bill Belichick, and who second on your list, who had Tom Brady. Same thing. Of course, Belichick is 70 years old. Holy, still see. You wonder how he's going to do without Brady. But before we get into that, we have a Dave from Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. Hey, Matthew, what happened to Penn State football team? I think he's talking about this past Saturday.
Well, hey, Coach Franklin, he can't win the big ones, man. That's his thing. I know I got a friend of mine, Mike C. DePel. He's against Franklin too. He's always been against Franklin. It's just he can get into the minor bowl games, man, but he can't win those big ones. And right now, I think it's a question of for who wins the Big Ten conference. It's going to be the winner of that Michigan-Ohio State game. That's going to be the key. Who's going to get not only win the Big Ten conference, but also who's going to get into that the college football playoff, in my view, Dave.
Eric from Foster, Rhode Island. Boston Celtics hammer Philadelphia Sixers, Matt. Bring on those Cleveland Cavaliers, Peter. Any thoughts, Matthew?
I think for the Sixers, they got off to a loss here. I think this is going to be a make or break year for Doc Rivers. If he can't make a significant showing and go deep into the playoffs, at least get him into the NBA championship finals, I think this could be his last year. I think, if he can't get a great year out of the beard, I think this could be the end for Doc Rivers, in my view. It's interesting that the Celtics, despite the loss of their head coach, due to that scandal, they're still winning and all that. So it's a good start for the Celtics.
Sal from Germantown, Pennsylvania. Any thoughts on Washington Commanders owner Daniel Snyder? He is terrible, trying to take the NFL down.
Well, that's the tragedy. I mean, I know it's not PC. The fact that Washington lost the name of Redskins. I mean, I still think of them as the Redskins. I know Mark Mancini thinks of them as the Redskins and all that. I'll tell you what, they changed those uniforms. You know what it looks like? They look like to me a two-bit semi-pro team, and it looks like a pale imitation of the USA Trojans outfit. And it's so sad. I mean, I talk to old-time, Washington fans, and it's like a nightmare with them. And Dan Snyder, he's a curse. I mean, in my book, a bunch of coaches, Joe Gibbs, when his comeback, he actually damaged his rating according to my rating system there. Marty Schottenheimer, his rating was damaged with that one season he coached for Dan Snyder. Mike Shanahan had his rating damaged because he coached in Washington under Dan Snyder. It's like a curse, it's just, everything Dan Snyder touches turns to dung, horse dung,
Albert from Poway, California. Hey, Peter, what's happening with your Cleveland Browns and Cleveland Guardians? Well, the Browns are having a tough year. The Guardians wait till next year. Any thoughts, Matthew?
For the Browns, it's in a sense all they did was inherit the name, but they're still an expansion team. It's kind of sad. I mean, it's like a pale imitation of what was, and they can't recapture that magic. I mean, they caught lightning in a bottle last year, but right now they lost 3 in a row. And actually, the AFC North is a very weak division. If they could suddenly catch fire, they might have a shot, at the title. Because Baltimore and Cincinnati, they're at 500. They're only, Cleveland's only a game behind, but they're the weak division right now, in my view. For the Guardians, I mean, you got to hand it to Terry Francona, the fact that he got him back in, the Central Division title and all that. Terry Francona is a great manager. I know when my next book comes out, Patriarchs of the Dugout, Baseball's Greatest Managers, which will be released in 2026, I know Terry Francona will be featured in that book as one of the 50 greatest Major League managers of all time. Other than the name change, I can't, I don't know. I just can't think of him that way. I'm old-fashioned. I know it's not politically correct, but I don't care, man. I'm still an Indians man, all that, But God bless the Indians. I was rooting for him in the ALDS,
Ron from Spokane, Washington. Love your guests. Very informative each and every week. I am driving, listening to you, Peter. Thanks so much, Ron. Now, moving on to Bill Belichick, the second on your list. He won 6 Super Bowls, lost 3, especially that tough one where they were perfect until the end of the Super Bowl. He started in Cleveland and was hated here because they released Bernie Kosar, who was that was a sad situation. But anyway, yeah, Belichick, and he just tied this past Sunday. They destroyed Cleveland. He tied George Halas, who's third on the all-time wins list. So Bill Belichick, I look at that guy, and he seems to be a man of concentration. Obviously, you mentioned in your book working 18-hour days, which I think that would kill you. And he's still alive at 70. So anyway, Bill Belichick, incredible. And it's kind of sad in Cleveland. He was really hated here because we didn't know, and Bernie Kosar's career really was pretty much over, and Kosar was a star, and he thought he was great, and Belichick at that time was a nobody, and so that was a sad situation. But man, what a guy! He's so low key, and he hasn't tried to please the media because it's just not in his nature. But what are your thoughts on the amazing career of Bill Belichick?
You know, as I stated in my book, had this book come out a year ago or 2 years ago, Bill Belichick would have been ranked number 1 according to my rating system. But the last 2 seasons, 2020 and 2021, it damaged his ranking, especially in the average season rating. He lost points off that, and he dropped down to 6th place behind Paul Brown. And it cost them because before the 2021 season started, they were actually in a dead heat in composite rating, but Belichick had the superior regular season winning percentage. So that was why he ranked number 1. But it damaged his winning percentage. Now he's 2 points behind Paul Brown in that regard. He's also behind Paul Brown, you know, in the average season rating, one of my 6 categories. And, you know, and it damaged him enough. The thing is, right now, the sad thing is, right now he's at 3-3. And if he has another subpar season where if he doesn't go deep in the playoffs or he fails to make the playoffs, it'll stop him from regaining that top spot against Paul Brown. I mean, if he can get this team ignited, though it's going to be hard because Mac Jones is hurt, if he could get this team ignited in some way, you know, and, you know, pull off, you know, a great run, a regular season run, he might have a shot. I mean, what he has to do is he literally has to win another Super Bowl again to be able to get back into the number 1 position in the eyes of my rating system. It's not technically impossible, but the way he's going now, it's not looking good. So it wouldn't surprise me when this 2022 season ends. Bill Belichick is still in 2nd place behind Paul Brown in the eyes of my system. And sometimes I wonder to myself, is Bill Belichick kind of doing like Tom Landry did with Dallas in the 80s? Hanging on too long, perhaps? I wonder. I mean, you were talking about Otto Graham. Paul Brown lamented. You said he never could find a replacement for Otto Graham, and hey, Belichick lost Tom Brady, and somehow he just can't find the man to replace Tom Brady. I mean, how do you do it? It's kind of sad in a way. But I mean, Belichick, the greatest head coach of the 21st century, bar none. I mean, just amazing, stupendous.
Yeah. You wonder about that. You wonder how long he's going to go. You wonder how long Tom Brady's going to go. And then I know, like I said, I think he's 70 years old, but he looks fine, and he looks like he's not. And some of these other coaches, you can see they last about 10 years, and it just is destroying them. They're out. He's been in for 30 years now, and he doesn't seem to have changed at all. So I find him an amazing person, and it was nice to see him. It was good that at least George Halas's name was brought up, since he just tied him this past Sunday, and I thought, oh, look at this guy here. This guy we had in Cleveland, we didn't recognize that we had a genius here, and the whole thing was tragic because here he comes and beats us again, and doesn't have Brady, and the Browns are horrible. Bill Belichick. Oh wow. And what an interesting life, and how he his whole how they've been this, and he like his ability to interest in learning. I think Paul Brown seemed to be kind of set in his ways, whereas Belichick is really sort of a real learner, which is so important because everything's changing. So really, what an incredible guy, and you just wonder what's going to happen here. He's without Brady, so you find out. And these great coaches, they had to have a great quarterback. And not only a great quarter, but a great organization and he had, Bob Kraft. You have to give Bob Kraft credit for his, because the owner is a key part of success, a very key part.
I think Belichick, it's like, what's it Earl Weaver, the late Earl Weaver once said, it's what you learn after you know it all is what counts. And Belichick is like that too. Man, I talk about it. He was always quizzing people, always asking questions, talking to other great coaches, successful coaches, not just in football, but, baseball, basketball, hockey, always asking questions. Okay, what's your personal secret? Is there anything new that you come up with? Anything that I can use, to keep my players' noses to the grindstone, keep them hungry, keep them striving for more. He never stopped. He's never stopped asking those questions, and that's a sign, coach, not stuck in his ways. I mean, he's always trying to find something new. I mean, that was a trick he learned from Jimmy Johnson. I know Dave Halberstam in that bio on Belichick. He said he linked up with Jimmy Johnson, and Jimmy Johnson told him once. He said, "You always got to find a new way of teaching the same old lessons. Always find a way to make it new." And Belichick took that to heart, and he's always finding new and better ways. In other words, don't let up. keep going for that next championship. Don't be satisfied with the last one. Always be hungry for the next one. And during those glory years, he was able to do it. And then he's lost Brady. And the key is, can he, regain that magic there? And that's a question. Right now, again, it's not really looking good. And you wonder, if he'll ever regain that top spot like he did for 2 years in 2019 and 2020.
Now, moving on to number 3 in your list of greatest NFL coaches, George Halas, which talk about NFL history. 6 titles, first in 1921, last in 1963. They started out kind of like Curly Lambeau with a company team where, Halas was just working. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing. The Staley Starch Works Company in Decatur, Illinois. So they were the Decatur Staleys in 1920. Then, they moved to Chicago, became the Bears, won 6 championships. George Halas, what an incredible, talk about NFL history. And then the 1940 when they lost a game to the Redskins 7-3, and then beat them in the title game 73-0. Oh, that's one of the Bronco Nagurski, Red Grange, 1925. Yeah. Oh wow, I remember my dad saying his father, Red Grange. My grandfather's hero was Red Grange, and then of course Dick Butkus, and then he. Here he brings in Mike Ditka and Buddy Ryan near the end of his, and who, of course, that's the last Bears title, 1985 Bears. So, what can you say about George Halas, Matthew?
George Halas didn't make NFL history. He was NFL history incarnate. He was literally there when the concept of what became the NFL in 1922 was born in September 1920. When he and a bunch of guys created this thing called the American Professional, Football Association, the APFA, and that became the precursor, to the NFL. It was the APFA in 1920, 1921, and then it changed its name to the NFL that we know and love and worship today. But he was working in a starch factory in Decatur, the Staley Starch Factory. He was a regular worker, but the thing was though. They had a corporate team. He prevailed upon the owner of the Starch Factory. Let me create a football team here. Let's create a sports team there. It wasn't just football. They could play baseball. And remember, Halas was a baseball player. For a brief time, he played for the New York Yankees. Then he got hurt, and then it ended his baseball career, and he went back to Decatur and got involved in football. He was a talented, a multi-sport athlete there, and he played football at the University of Illinois. And also, the idea of him just being a regular 9-to-5er, he just couldn't bear the thought. Sports was his life, and that's why he was able to create that football team, the Decatur Staleys, that later became what we now know and love today as the Chicago Bears. It was his life. He poured every single fiber of his being, his entire life savings, into making that franchise and keeping it alive and making it a power in the NFL. During the 1920s when the NFL was struggling to get a footprint in the American sports consciousness, the Bears were one of the top 3 teams always. Only maybe once or twice maybe they were never in contention. Almost always, if they weren't in first place, they were always very close behind. And he was able to get these great players, Red Grange, George Trafton, Jimmy Conzelman. He won the title in 1921. Bronco Nagurski, Bill Hewitt, all those guys. And then eventually, in the late 40s, he creates one of the great powerhouses in NFL history, Sid Luckman, Bill Osmanski, Bulldog Turner, George McAfee, one of the great open field runners in NFL history. They win the 1940 title 73-0. That is still the greatest blowout in NFL postseason history. It'll never be broken. Never be broken. 73-0, 11 touchdowns, and it would have been 77-0 if they hadn't missed 4 extra points. It was insane, And then they won again in 41. They actually had a perfect regular season record in 42, but they lost the NFL championship game in 42. The thing was, Halas was in the Navy at that time. World War II was in action, and he got a commission. He served overseas in the Southwest Pacific Theater under MacArthur. And the Bears won again in 43, and finally in 46, Halas was back at the helm there and led them to an NFL title. The thing is, the problem is Halas made the Bears, but in some ways he unmade them because he was a great coach. He was innovative use of game films there, using coaching and all. They got Clark Shaughnessy introduced the T formation. For a time, the Bears were the only team that were using the T formation in the 30s and the 40s. The man in motion and all that. It was so innovative. Everyone else, it altered the face of pro football irrevocably. But the problem was Halas himself. Halas was very much that of the plantation. He was stingy, like you wouldn't believe. I mean, he lost Mike Ditka, because he traded Mike Ditka rather than give him a raise. He traded Mike Ditka away. He made it hard for Butkus to get well-deserved raises. In fact, he sent Butkus to quack doctors when Butkus got hurt. And later on, Butkus had to sue George Halas because he was supposed to get severance pay, and Halas wasn't giving it to him. Butkus won his case in court. I mean, there was a pettiness. I mean, one of the reasons why the Bears lost the 1956 NFL championship game against the Giants is that they played the game in New York. It was ice-cold weather. Halas was too cheap, and you didn't bring sneakers for his men to use, so they could get better grip, traction on the icy turf there. Whereas the Giants had sneakers, and that's why the Bears lost 47-7. And it was just, the fact is, he had lost the 34 sneakers game in an icy cold storm because the Giants used sneakers. You'd think he of all people would have remembered that lesson. No, he was cheap. He could be chintzy. After the Bears won the 63 NFL title, the Bears players were hoping for a nice little reward, beautiful fur coats for their wives, beautiful ornate rings. No, he just gave them chintzy chunk jewelry, and the morale of the team went right straight to zero, and that's why they failed to repeat in 64. I mean, there was a pettiness there. And also, after he died, the McCaskey family, even to this day, the Bears have been so chronically mismanaged because of the McCaskies there. It's kind of like a curse, as it were. I mean, with the exception of that 85 Super Bowl season, I mean, okay, yeah, they were in the Super Bowl in the 05 season, but they didn't win. It's so eerie in its nature, It's beautiful in a way, for Halas because of what he created, but also there was also a curse as well. So it's like he gave with one hand and he took away with the other. But what a legend! I mean, he was it's like a tree in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve's initials on it. That was George Halas.
Yeah, and the NFC title trophy is the George Halas Trophy. Yep. And another thing caught my eye was him signing George Blanda in 1949. I think he was a quarterback because I remember Blanda in the 70s as an old punter for the Raiders. We're running out of time here. We got about 3 minutes. Would you like to talk about Red Grange? Because he was a big part of the life of George Halas.
Well, the signing of Red Grange, I mean, 3 years from now will be the centennial. That was such a landmark moment in the history of the NFL. It gave It gave a huge dose of legitimacy to the NFL. I mean, people are shocked at this. Back then, pro football, there was a lot of scorn and contempt for pro football. I mean, it was viewed with extreme suspicion. I mean, people thought, no, college football was superior. And actually, no. I mean, but what Grange did was he was the first college superstar to make the leap from college football to the NFL there. And what he did was he inspired others like Benny Friedman, Wildcat Wilson, Bronco Nagurski, other future college stars, Don Hudson. Okay, if Grange can do it and he can make money, I can do it too. And it really went a long way to helping the NFL establish that footprint in the American sports consciousness. Because before Grange came there, I mean, if you look at the sports pages, you see very little space devoted to the NFL there. It was always college football. But when he joined the Bears there, it really, people started following the NFL there. I mean, he sold out stadiums throughout all the country when he toured with the Bears there. It saved the NFL.
Our guest has been Matthew DiBiase. Our topic has been Lords of the Gridiron 2, Pro Football's Greatest Coaches 2022, a new book that just came out. And we're going to try to, after this show, we'll schedule for four weeks from tonight. Matthew DiBiase, wonderful show. What are your final thoughts tonight for our audience?
Yeah, my book is up on sale on Amazon. It's not available in stores. You must buy it all at Amazon. It's on sale at 30% off, and it will remain on sale until after Super Bowl 57 is played. So if you want a stocking stuffer, go and get it.
Yeah, I recommend. I'm reading it, and I'm so happy that you wrote it because it's a history of the NFL through the greatest coaches. So it's just one final question. On the cover of the book, it looks like a statue of a coach. Is that a particular coach, or is that just a artist's rendition? It's
a portion of the statue of Tom Landry that stands outside of the Dallas Cowboys Stadium today. It's Tom Landry's statue.
Okay, I'm glad to know that. Oh, wonderful having Matthew DiBiase on the show tonight, and I highly recommend his book, Lords of the Gridiron 2, Pro Football's Greatest Coaches. As he said, you can get it on Amazon. And next week we're going to have the center fielder and leadoff hitter for the coolest MLB team of all time, the Oakland A's of the early 1970s, Mr. Bill North, and we will be scheduling Matthew DiBiase 4 weeks from yesterday. Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. God, thanks again, Mr. Matthew DiBiase.
Take care.
Okay, you too. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.